The elements will destroy you.
Hello, and welcome to my guide series. I'm Theo, and in this guide I will tell you all about the Control Shaman. I'll mainly cover the Control Shaman deck, with which I finished number 15 Legend in January, and is incredible when facing a very aggressive meta. Besides the deck I was using, I'll also cover the other variants of Control Shaman briefly. So, first of all, why would you want to play this deck? This deck is incredibly good against any aggressive decks. I've personally had over 80% win rate against all aggro decks in High Legend. The whole deck is built around beating aggro, so when you feel like crushing aggro, this is your deck. Also, people do not expect it. If you queue up against Shaman, you generally expect an aggro Shaman or a mid-Jade Shaman. This will cause your opponents to Mulligan aggressively for anti-aggro cards, which are generally pretty bad against Control Shaman, giving you an advantage in the Mulligan phase. And lastly, it is also very consistent. The reason this deck is so good against aggro is because it is one of the most consistent decks. Because you are running several taunts, heals and AoE cards, you will almost always have at least one of them when you need them. This guide will cover the following topics. First, I will cover the deck list. Now, I will not only show you my deck list, but also some other Control Shaman lists. I will talk about where you want to play which list and why I have chosen my list. I will also go through a few cards that you can use instead if you want to change certain matchups. After that, I will discuss the most frequent matchups for the deck on the ladder. I'll go over the Mulligan phase for each matchup, and we'll also cover the general game plan against these decks and what you want to focus on during the game. And finally, I'll provide you some general gameplay tips which you could use during the game. Shown on screen are the three different lists people run when playing Control Shaman. The first one is the one you see most often, and is a list that's somewhere in between control and mid-range. Although it is still running a lot of defensive cards, I consider it more of a mid-range list, so I will not cover it any further, but it's here in case you want to play a bit more proactive list. The second is VOPS Control Shaman, focusing on the Dissolve package with a few Jade cards. The Jade cards here function similar to Aggro Shaman, where they complement the main build. The list is less reliant on their Jade synergy, but has cards that are stronger on their own. Also, Dissolve is incredibly powerful against decks that do not have sufficient AoE, and with double Wide Eyes, this deck has a lot of threats, and you can often win in Fatigue. The third list is the one I'll be mainly covering. It's a list which I got from Paradox, who wrote a great guide for it on Reddit. This is a list which is completely tacked towards aggro, making it a great meta call when it is dominated by aggro Shaman. However, if you face an increasing amount of Reno decks, this deck is less optimal to beat those decks. The list is pretty optimized, so instead of giving a core list with tag cards, I'll name a few cards you could consider replacing and with which cards you could replace them. Again, I wouldn't change this list, but if you really want to, this is what I would change. So the cards I would consider replacing, if you want to fit other cards in, are Devolve. It's great against aggressive decks, but can sometimes be clunky against Control or Jade decks. Lava Shock, the deck only has two cards that make this card worth running, Lightning Storm and mainly Elemental Destruction. Again, this is another card that's pretty good against aggro, where also the removal is often pretty nice, but against slower decks can sometimes be very low value, as you don't need its damage or the tempo gain after Elemental Destruction. Mana Tide is important against control decks, as it can often draw several cards, but against aggro, it is often nothing more than a 3 mana cycle card, making it quite underwhelming, while your opponent is developing their board instead. And these are the cards that you could replace them with. Acidic Swamp Ooze and Harrison Jones. If you want to hate aggro decks with weapons even more, these are excellent choices and make those matchups even more one-sided. Wide Eyes. It is great against control, as it gives you 2 threats in one and helps you in Fatigue. It's still decent against aggro, although 5 mana for a 5/5 taunt is still a little expensive. Alazael the Ascended works well as an additional heal, but mainly gets more board-focused aggro mid-range decks, as it is rather slow against decks such as Pirate Warrior. Ragnaros the Firelord. If you want to tech a bit against control, Ragnaros is always a solid inclusion, especially if you want to honor his last few months as standard. In general, you want to keep 2 things in mind for the Mulligan. First, you want to assume that your opponent is playing the most aggressive or the most common deck of his class. And second, if you already have a good opening, you can keep cards that you otherwise wouldn't keep, but are still pretty good in a matchup if you already have the most important cards. With Control Shaman, I think this is even more important than usual. For example, a Jade Lightning is very strong against Rogue, but Evolve, Hex, or Jade Claws for example are even more important. The same counts for Aya Blackpaw. A really good card in slow matchups, but not worth keeping with a bad hand. However, if you already have the best cards, you can definitely consider keeping her. Against Shaman, you want to keep Devolve, Maelstrom Portal, Jade Claws, Elemental Destruction, Healing Wave, and Hex. Aggro Shaman is a very good matchup due to having a ton of healing and board clears. This matchup is all about surviving and letting the opponent run out of steam. If you only have one Storm or Destruction in hand, make sure it will be used efficiently, because winning through a big board is one of the ways the aggro Shaman wins. If you only have one answer in your hand to Flame Wreath Faceless, try to save it as long as possible, instead of using it on the mediocre target. If you think you might die next turn, play your healing cards instead of developing, as aggro Shamans only have a certain amount of direct damage. Mid-range Shaman lists differ a lot, from being close to aggro, more like Garrison lists, or just full-on Jade Shamans. It can be hard to see earlier what your opponent is playing, so I generally assume it's the more aggressive mid-range Jade deck. It is important to identify what sort of list they are playing, to know if you need to play around certain cards, such as Flametongue Totem or not. It's important to use all AoEs efficiently, so save your AoE if the board isn't too impressive, and you have healing in your hand so you can take the hits. Save your Hex for their Aya and late game Jades, and use the Volve on the early aggro cards. Also, if you can, try to play around Bloodlust, as it is a card I've seen used a lot more often lately. Against Warrior, you want to Mulligan for the Volve, Maelstrom Portal, Jade Claws, Elemental Destruction, and Healing Wave. Pirate Warrior is a very favourite matchup. Consider every turn which play gives you the most health, as together with all the removal, healing and taunts, this deck makes it really hard for the warrior to push enough damage. Also, if they have a weapon, try and remove their pirates, do not give them extra damage on their weapon through Bloodseal Cultist. A Taunt Totem can be incredibly strong in this matchup due to blocking chargers and weapons, so I often try to fit in hero power to get it. Especially late game this is important, because even though they might kill the Taunt Totem, you get guaranteed another Taunt Totem if you had all 4 totems. Dragon Warrior is also a favorite matchup, although less so compared to Pirate Warrior. While you have the same tools to handle their aggression, they pack a lot more late game than Pirate Warrior. The Volve is very good in this matchup, as most of their minions are overstatted with all the dragons. Don't mind using AoE early, as late game they generally only play big threats, and you want to save your single target removal for that. Also be sure to play around Deathwing late game, as quite a few lists play it now, so don't overextend into it if you don't need to when you are ahead. Control Warrior is also a favorite matchup. Generally you want to have one big Jade on the board to play around Brawl. In this matchup you want to go for the long game, so doing 4-5 damage per turn is often enough pressure, as they often have to face tech minions to keep up with their threats. Use any opportunity to use your AoE, as Control Warriors run very few minions. If they equip Gorehowl, try to get the Taunt Totem before you play your Jade Golems to force the warrior to use spells to clear it. Some control lists also run Deathwing, so also keep that in mind here. Against Rogue, you are looking for the Volve, Jade Claws, Elemental Destruction, Healing Wave, and Hex. Miracle Rogue is a really good matchup, due to it basically functioning like an aggro deck. You have answers for every single minion they can play. The Volve is incredible against Van Cleef and Questings, while Hex, Jade Lightning, and Elemental Destruction can easily deal with Tomb Pillagers, Azure Drakes, and Gadgets and Auctioneers. Don't be afraid to use a Hex on a Tomb Pillager if you have another one or the Volve in your hand, as the Lightning Coin is a pretty big deal. Be sure to always count the maximum damage they can do with the Leroy combo, so try to play around it and use your heal if you don't feel safe. Against Priest, you keep the Volve, Jade Claws, Elemental Destruction, Hex, and Thing from Below. The Dragon Priest is a deck with a ton of minions, making it a good matchup for Control Shaman. Elemental Destruction and the Volve do really well with all their minions, in combination with any other damage spells or weapons. They only run 2 Shadow Depths, so try to clear the board first to force them to use one on a medium-sized Jade instead of a big one. Be careful to not overextend into your own Elemental Destruction if you haven't seen their Dragonet Operative card yet. They have almost no burst and can't really damage you without a board, so don't be afraid of using your healing on minions. Against Warlocks, you want to get Jade Claws, Hex, Mana Tide, Jade Spirit, and Thing from Below. Lock is a very unfavored matchup due to their endless answers the deck has. Try to pressure them a bit early, but don't overextend after turn 8 to play around both Twisting Nether and a big Shadow Flame. However, keep in mind that sometimes you do have to overextend, because most Locks run Jiraxis, and with the little burst this deck has, it is very hard to beat after a few turns. You can often overextend a bit if you have Aya, as most of the time they can't kill the Jade from her Death Rattle after a board clear. The Volve can be fantastic against both Twilight Drake and Faceless Shambler, so try to keep one for those. Against Mage, you look for Jade Claws, Hex, Mana Tide Totem, Jade Spirit, and Thing from Below. Reno Mage is just like Lock, a deck with a ton of removal. However, they do lack the huge AoEs of Shadow Flame and Twisting Nether, making this matchup a bit better. If they get the Brand Kazakas off, it can be really difficult to win, so do try to pressure them a bit to force a single Kazakas early. Without Kazakas, it Reno Mage can't handle a big board, so a Bran plus Jade late game is pretty devastating. Sometimes the Mage is forced to go for an all-in plan, so always try to have a healing card ready if the Mage has enough time to go for Alexstrasza and damage spells after. Against Druids, you mulligan for Jade Claws, Hex, Mana Tide Totem, Jade Spirit, Jade Lightning, and Think from Below. The Jade Druid matchup is often dependent on how fast the Jade Druid can stack their Jades. While you all can often clear the board early with your AoE, you only have 2 hexes available to deal with the big Jades. As generally Druids ramp up the Jades a bit quicker, it can be hard to keep up. This is especially bad because unlike a lot of other decks, keeping up with them means you will lose because of Jade Idol, which will generate an infinite amount of Jade Golems in the late game. Because Druids don't have a lot of ways to deal with big minions, the goal is to get ahead on board. This can be done with an Elemental Destruction plus Jade, or with a Hex plus Jade. Don't be too afraid to use Hex early, as the tempo gained from it can be hard for the Druid to come back from. Paladin and Hunter are still barely played on the ladder, so due to lack of experience against him, I'll just give a few tips. Against Paladin, both Hex and Evolve are amazing at stopping the Murloc army. If you can, always use one of these on either Bluegill Warrior or Murloc War Leader. However, the Paladin will try to suicide their own Murlocs, so this might not always work. In that case, you always want to save the Evolve for the Anyfin to prevent their second Anyfin from doing a ton of damage. Make sure to always counter maximum damage and try to stay above it. Against Hunter, if you found one that is, you'll probably go for the usual anti-aggro cards and the strategy to just survive the early game, hex the high mains and exhaust the resources. And now, to some final tips. When do you want to use Lava Shock? It might seem simple, but often you want to give it a bit of consideration. If you use Elemental Destruction and have Lava Shock, you don't always have to use it immediately. You have to think about your next turn. Do you need all your mana next turn? Then use Lava Shock. Do you not need the mana next turn? Then wait with using it and decide next turn whether you need the mana or removal from Lava Shock, or that you don't need it at all and it can even save the card. When to use Bran Bronze Spirit. Knowing when to play Bran Bronze Spirit can sometimes be really important. Against aggro, you most of the time either want to play it when you have 3 mana left, just to have a body on the board, or use it together with Ginger Water Speaker for extra health. Against control, it is often more difficult to decide when to play it, because you have to consider your opponent's ability to board clear. For example, both Reno Lock and Control Warrior have board clears that do incredibly well with any board, regardless of size. Against these decks, an early Bran with a Jade card is often pretty good, as this allows your later Jades to get bigger while not letting them easily get killed by the aforementioned cards. Against decks such as Druid or Reno Mage, they generally aren't able to deal with a board full of big minions, so here you might prefer to save it for later in the game to get a huge Jade turn. How to use the Evolve. You want to use the Evolve when you expect the board to be significantly worse after using it, or when it will probably allow your AoE to clear the whole board. You generally can expect a 1-1 at 1 mana, a 2-2 at 2 mana, etc. Above 5 mana this is generally different though, because a lot of those minions have powerful effects, especially at 8 mana. Also 0 mana minions always are a 1-1, so the Evolve on board with totems and 1 mana pirates into Maelstrom Portal should always clear it. Lightning Storm versus Elemental Destruction. Which one do you want to use when? When there are 3 half minions on the board, it can sometimes be hard to decide whether to use Elemental Destruction or Lightning Storm, especially in the early game. Here you have to consider how bad it is if you hit 2 on all targets when using Storm, versus the best play of your opponent next turn, considering you don't have mana if you use Elemental Destruction. For example, if you have a Troll on board and just played Feral Spirits, Elemental Destruction is an easy choice. Not only do you guarantee a clear and reduce the damage, the fact that you have no mana next turn isn't a big deal, as the opposing Shaman has only 2 mana available, often meaning they will just hero power. And that's the end of this guide. Thank you for watching my take on Control Shaman. Let me know in the comments what guide you'd like to see next, and if you want to see other content on this channel. If you like this guide and want to see more, you can watch my last guide to Reno Lock, or you can go to my Twitch channel, where I stream daily. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all at my next guide.